So, in Spiritual Grief, episode 2, I want to look much more at coming from a place of depression to energy. Because depression is what I feel is a toxic emotion, because it's pushing the body into stagnancy, deep rest, nothing. And whereas an energized, free flowing emotion, which might well be sadness and pain and tears and trauma releasing from the body, is a much more healthier place, I feel, than something that is pushed into deep rest stagnancy, not wanting to move, change, catalyze anything. And that gives a feeling of wanting to give up, and no hope, hopelessness. And that's one thing that I feel should be embraced on the spiritual side of grief, is that actually there's always hope, there's always light, there's always spirit, but that it's absolutely okay to feel emotionally bereft and to catalyze all those emotions. So I'll be focusing on many things, but the key is that. Now, I also want to say that there is such a wealth of different people dealing with grief in different ways. And I feel like we should embrace all of them. Going through grief myself, I really understood that no two people deal with it in the same way at all, even if they're spiritual or religious or atheist. However that is, it has such a plethora of what you've been through, what else is going on in your life, what you're open to, what your tendencies are. So it just means that everybody is so different, and to try and honour and witness other people's grief as you navigate your own is probably one of the most challenging things you can do. I've also realised that there's like a spiritual grief club, or maybe I should say grief club. So a lot of people have been able to easily connect with me who have also lost parents, and they show a kindness and compassion and openness. So it feels like as people get older and lose more people, they learn to navigate grief in a wiser, softer, more loving way, because they've walked this journey themselves. But I think it would be really valuable if we brought this into our society earlier and understood it, so it wasn't such an isolating thing, because the older that you get, the more you can be more isolated from groups, from bigger social groups, from peers, through family. So I think it's just really important to bring grief to the forefront earlier on, so that it's not such a taboo, and we're all sort of sharing in it together. So I think a really important point about bringing this spiritual aspect of grief in is making space for our loved ones that have passed on. Like any relationship we'd have in life, if we never called someone, if we never made any effort, if we never said kind words to them, if we never gave gifts to them or did something nice for someone, we wouldn't have a good relationship, a good friendship, a good family. So it's the same, I feel, when a loved one's passed on. If you want contact with that loved one, if you want to make a connection with them, if you want them to help you and guide you and feel supported, you have the freedom and the ability to do this. And it just means dedicating time. Now, the easiest way to do this is either going to a sacred space, i.e., a place in nature that they loved, maybe their garden. I often sit in the spot I used to sit with my dad to just feel the sun on our faces. And I just say, wish you were here. And I scrolled down to probably one of the last text messages I got from him. And it did say, when he was sitting in the garden, wish you were here. So I just send out that signal to his spirit, wish you were here. And that's my intention, to draw him in and say, here you are. And just to spend that space with him. The other way that you can do it is very much in your mind's eye. We can connect with anyone, anywhere in any dimension. I mean, I found this a lot. I spoke to a lot of people about this in COVID when we were in lockdown. And I was writing a play about ancient Egypt at the time. And a few people had asked me before, will you ever go to Egypt to see what the place is like, because you're writing about it? And I was like, I don't need to, because one, I'm talking about ancient Egypt and it doesn't exist like it does today. But two, we have no limits. So we can go interdimensionally to any place. We can time travel. We are totally free in our souls and our spirits to just travel interdimensionally. So with that in mind, we can have a sacred space in our spiritual realm to connect with our loved ones. And so that can be anywhere. For me, one of my dad's favourite songs was Up on the Roof by Drifters. And it was playing in my ears. I'm very clairaudient, so songs are often sent and they're ringing in my ears. And it was ringing very much this morning, and I was walking along thinking, that's where I want to meet you, up on the roof. Because that song is very much about when life is getting you down, just come up on the roof. And I love that idea that you can escape the mundane. And I was feeling very, very saddened by my grief this morning, seeing the effect that it's had on my mum. It was difficult to witness. Gently taking a pair of my dad's shoes away and thinking about maybe they shouldn't be by the front door. Things that are very practical and things that you have to go through when you're closing a chapter of someone in your life and developing a new relationship. So I made a commitment to myself that I would meet my dad up on the roof, that we would spend that time there in meditation. I would meet him there where the troubles just melt away, and it's us in a higher perspective, my higher self meeting his higher self and having that communion up on the roof. So I invite you, if you're going through grief, to have a sacred space, maybe in the physical and maybe in the fifth dimension as well, which is where all spiritual realms reside, the 50 and above. So have that sacred space. It's important, and find a way to continue that relationship, because much like a friendship or a family or a committed relationship, any relationship that we have, if we didn't call or make an effort or do something nice for that person, we wouldn't develop that relationship. If we just ignored them, that relationship would disappear. And so I invite you to cultivate a really strong relationship with your loved one in spirit, because they are there when you call, and just meet them in that place, either in a physical or a metaphysical. And I think while a lot of people might go to a graveyard and visit a grave or somewhere where ashes have been scattered or have that kind of physical, I don't feel that we need to save it. I'm reading a book from a medium at the moment, and she said loved ones don't really go to there where they were buried. That's depressing for them. Like, they want to go somewhere where they're celebrated or they're free or somewhere they really want to explore. And I love that concept, because it's like, rather than weighing yourself down, go somewhere that makes your spirit sing, and they come and join you in that embrace of being there. But on that, I also wanted to bring in the idea of welcoming in, honouring the way that you want to honour someone. And I feel like sometimes we need permission. Certainly for me, as a spiritual person, there's no rules set out. I'm not religious, so religion doesn't help me at all. I'm spiritual, but I'm very spiritually in my own right. It's not necessarily a doctrine or a following. I've had very sort of witch practices, priestess, shamanic, angelic. There's a lot of different practices that I have been trained in this life and previous, but my own spirituality is very unique. So the way that I want to honour my dad is very unique. For me, sacred space and altars are very important. So we just a few days ago got his ashes back, and I put flowers around that space and put all of his special items, and just gathered a sacred altar to my dad. And I have altars at home to him as well. So it's like I'm bringing it in to my space, a sacred ceremony to him to honour his life. And it's a great place for me to sit by and meditate and connect with him as well. And that leads me to my dad's funeral. And I know I went into the funeral thinking, I spoke to my sister about it, and it was very much like, I'm going to hold Dad a soul ceremony as a healer separately, and then I'm going to do the funeral, because that's what you're expected to do. And what ended up happening is we had the most beautiful chaplain come in, and she spoke to me and my mum and my sister, and she was like, let's make the funeral as you wish to have it. It's up to you. I'm here to support you. Which was so beautiful because it gave us freedom and permission to bring in whatever we wanted. And what we ended up doing was creating a funeral straight from our hearts, out of love for this man that had recently died. You know, that was our dad. That was my mum's husband. You know, we wanted him honoured. And he never left his wishes of how he wanted a funeral. The only one thing he'd ever said about 20 years ago was, put in Spirit of the Sky at my funeral. I love that song. So we ended the funeral with that. But everything else, we were like, what would he want? We knew that he loved his music, but that was about it. And so what ended up happening is I channeled a couple of poems, which I put on the channel, an ode to my dad, and Where Have You Gone? Because I wanted to celebrate the man he was, and also honour my spiritual belief and give people comfort in a funeral that actually no one can ever be gone. And then I also wrote his committal, and that was a bit more of a push. Poetry, yes. This is kind of what I do. This is what I channel. And I felt that this is how I could honour my dad the most, because he wanted me to write. And my sister did his eulogy by collecting stories. And it was just beautiful. It was so beautiful to have both of his daughters read and put their hearts into something. And I know that it touched my mum completely, and it touched a lot, everybody that was there. We had a lot of feedback going, that funeral was stunning. It was beautiful. It was something special. And that's not usual words you associate with a funeral. But I did write his committal, and I actually wrote it to honour the 10 bodies of light, which is an Egyptian practice, because my sister had said to me, well, who does the afterlife well? You know, surely somebody does these sort of burial rites. And I was like, of course, the Egyptians. I mean, most of their life and lineage and teachings were all about how to get someone safely through to the afterlife, which is what a funeral is all about at its core. It's about getting someone safely through. And this is what I ended up writing, something loosely around the 10 bodies of light and having him have a safe passage. And it had come to me because I'd done a shamanic journey on my dad when he was ill. He was in hospital, and I was doing a healing journey where I was connecting with his soul and seeing what he needed most, what I could do to most help him travel safely, navigate this time. And I could see that he was going to have quite a troubled night, and he had to sort of go through this experience of cleansing out, purging out his fears, so that he could have a more peaceful transition. And I very much believe that we need to do this work on a soul level. It's quite important to do it while we're living. It's also an Egyptian practice. And to help heal what we can, to just make that transition even easier, even lighter. And in that journey, I was like, Dad, wherever you go, I'm going to place you 10 white roses. And these white roses are to guide you on your journey, so your afterlife, so you're always safe, because you're going to see those 10. You just need to follow them. And I very much felt the presence and the spirit of my mum and my sister standing there too. I mean, in life, he called us his Peter's angels. So we were there going, we're here to support you. And what happened, I was doing a lot of work. There's the Tibetan Book of the Dead that I was reading after he passed. And there's a lot of guidance about the realms that you go to in the world. And I was working through these prayers with my dad to really ensure that his energy was lifting, he was going into the right place. I felt, because he died with a lot of pain and a lot of trauma, I just got the intuition that he wasn't, that it would take some spiritual work. So I was calling in all the teams and doing all the prayers. And then what happened after the funeral, actually within the funeral, I felt his presence a lot, was the energy was lighter. We felt that he crossed and he'd gone to a really amazing place, and I've had confirmation with that since. So I wanted to invite that in to bring in the idea of sacred funerals and to have them as you wish. And if you're spiritual yourself and you know that your family member would want to receive that on a soul level, and remember, we're inviting in the idea that you can always speak to your loved ones, so you can always ask them what they want and need, to invite in doing a new level of sacred funerals, because a lot of us don't have religion to hold on to anymore, and a lot of people are moving out of not having beliefs into spirituality, into searching, into knowing that we are way more than this physical body. And that means that we need new ways of honouring the death process, I feel, and a funeral is a great place to start to explore and bring something new and really sacred. And it's not just spirituality and love and light when it comes to talking about grief, death, and loss, because leading up to somebody dying can be some of the most traumatic time periods of your life. There's no getting around that. Even if you have a great spiritual belief and a faith, me personally have found that leading up to my father dying, and it was quite a long process of him getting sick, has been a really traumatic few years. And the final period was even harder than I ever expected. There were so many things to witness that brought about great trauma. And that did happen over a period of quite a few years, starting from finding out about his illness, also him losing different capacities with his mind. It has been a very difficult and trying process, and there was a lot of time periods when it felt too much for me to take, and I was just carrying on, carrying a great weight of anxiety and fear and pain and torment from seeing somebody go through this, and from seeing somebody I loved going through this, and trying whatever I could to help. And there's periods where there isn't anything that you can do. And that's a really hard thing to navigate. And it's still something that you navigate. I don't know, because it's something quite fresh and recent for me, how many years it will take for the pain and just the ease and the loving memory just to be left. But what I will say was a practice that I did a couple of weeks ago that really, really helped me, was a soul retrieval. Now, I do a lot of soul retrieval work in my sessions with people. I find there's a lot of soul loss for people in different past lives. I find that there's a lot of soul loss going through our lives. And what soul loss is basically whenever we go through something that traumatizes us, our soul will come away from the body so that we don't have to experience it. And how that this is, how most people understand this is, I went through a period, a really tough time when I was beaten up really badly, and it was something that I tried to like push away and forget about. But I was beaten up, and I didn't know whether I was going to make it out, and I was covering my head, and I was I took a kicking by these two men, and went to hospital and had quite a damaged face, but got over it. But I'd pushed it away. Now, whenever I thought of that memory, and I didn't try to think about it too much because I was very traumatized by it, and I know this because there was like, as soon as it happened, I was really jumpy and afraid and shaking all the time and having nightmares. And then I just lost confidence, and yeah, I was very, very on edge. And it took years. I mean, I think I buried it well, but then it was through some kind of therapy that came out years later. Now, what had happened when I originally thought of the event, I'd be outside of my body looking down on what was happening. It was like I'd come out of myself, and that is what I now understand as soul loss. So I just ejected out of this trauma so that I didn't have to fully experience it. And what happened later when I'd finally healed it is I could experience that, and I did have to go through the brutality of it. And what had really knocked my existence was, how could people do that? How could two men um, batter a woman on the floor? And when I finally went into that, I kind of had a sense of forgiveness and release, that's what happened, and it wasn't fair and it wasn't right, and there was nothing else I could do about that but accept that and heal it in myself. And that was the moment I came back into my body and felt integrated, and like some of my soul light had come back in. Now, often this can happen in past lives. I've spoken a lot. I wrote a play about it. I was killed as a witch in a past life. Now, at first, when I had that memory of being killed it was when I was going through angelic Reiki healing, and I saw myself hanging on a tree, and I just got a message, you were a witch. But I had no idea about witches at the time. I wasn't that interested in them. I just didn't know that much about them. To me, witches were sort of hags and spooky Halloween. I cannot believe I felt like that back then, but that's ignorance for you, I'm afraid. And so I didn't really understand why I was seeing this or why I'd be killed as a witch. And this sort of stayed with me and stayed with me. And I ended up writing a whole play about what a witch is, and yeah, and who I was, and why would somebody murder me in that way. But what happened as I was developing the play, as I was going along further with it, is that I would start to really go back into that trauma and understand it more and relive the experience. And that ended up re-traumatizing. I used to have like panic attacks because I could feel what was happening in that dimension. I could feel strangling. I really experienced it with my body. And that took quite a long cathartic process to go through and to understand that. And then inevitably, what happened is I actually called that part of my soul back in again. I integrated it when I understood it, witnessed it, forgived it, and healed it. And that was, I mean, I don't believe that you have to write a whole play to understand a past life, but it's certainly a big healing journey that I've taken on, and a process that I feel is the healing power of stories. So when I'd gone through this oh, traumatic time of seeing my dad ill and caring for him and witnessing such torment that he had to go through, I questioned why anybody would have to witness this. I was not happy. I was not happy as well because I'd written the same play. The second part of the play touches into caring for someone that's dying for cancer. So having to relive this in my life after I'd written this felt cruel, felt really cruel. I didn't want to go through this. So what happened was, after he passed, I realized that there was parts of me that were still traumatized by the whole process. And as much as I was working with his soul and his soul's transition and helping him on, it was also very important that I did my own soul work. And I did a lot of multi-dimensional soul retrieval, which means I went into different lifetimes that were calling me. And I went to different instances in my own life, in childhood, and through my dad's illness, and through his death, and through my own spiritual trauma. Sounds like a lot, but I can work very interdimensionally now, and was pulling all of those soul fragments back in. And then finally I felt like, okay, now I can be back to me, and back functioning and helping and serving in the world and being my full self. So I really recommend soul retrieval work for those that are suffering with trauma related with grief. And this can be through losing a loved one, which is immensely hard for the body to go through, that often our soul can eject, or from different past lives. I mean, I know a lot of people can get scared of going into this territory, and there are some traumatic timelines. I mean, human life can be very challenging, and we've been through some very dark ages. I feel that we're not out the other side. A planet that has wars and destruction and turns people against each other isn't an easy planet to be on. So I think we all have a lot of soul loss and soul trauma to work with and to pull back in to become whole healed selves. And so that leads me on to taking you from a place of creativity as the cure. I mean, for me, I did find writing, storytelling, poetry, plays, um, even journaling a great way to kind of understand my grief and my experience. It would be something that I continue to gently do and hold hands with. I often very strongly believe in not using something art as cathartic, but if you're not doing the healing along the side, it can be quite dangerous. So I feel that if you're touching on open wounds, difficult territory, my whole existence as an artist, as an actress, as a writer has always been aligned with being a healer alongside, or going to see healers because I was bringing up something big in me. So I was working alongside, and then eventually I became the healer and would always do the healing work alongside my writing. I feel very passionate about that we shouldn't just bulldoze into emotions and things and rip ourselves open and do ourselves damage. So one of an amazing practice that I'm finding, and it's especially so relevant to this week as we move up to different energy points. Last time we very much focused on the root chakra and grounding and that loss, leaving you feeling unsafe. So we now can move up to the sacral chakra, which is in our lower stomach, and this is our creative center. It's where womb spaces lie, and we've all come from the mother's womb. That's where we've all departed from. So this center can become really out of balance when we feel depressed, because it feels stagnant and it doesn't feel joyous or open. And when this sacral center is open, it doesn't mean that we're always full of joy. I mean, a lot of people talk about the sacral center as the abundant, joyful experience. But I also feel an open sacral center can also be a grief experience where emotions, water is flowing. We are feeling the depth of our human pain. We are feeling the loss and allowing that up and out. To me, that is a very healthy sacred center. And this is also a bright orange space, so you can feel into that and feel that charging up and going brighter. But what I'm going to do is go through a guided meditation just to help clear and align that, so that you do feel more creative and connected in. Because what depression can do, and lower moods and stagnant moods, is make you not move forward with anything. So you don't want to do your creative projects, you don't want to delve into your life, you're just stagnant and kind of lifeless. And the other thing that I will guide as well in this meditation is about entities and attachments. Now, often when we're in a state of grief, it's quite a low energy, it's a low mood, it can be quite painful. Now, some people have dealt with pain and loss through addictions and reaching for alcohol or drugs or food or ways to medicate. And this sacral center is all linked in with addictions as well. But what on another level some people don't realize is that that's when we can get entity attachments. I work a lot in the shadow realms, understanding demonic attachments, dark agenda programmings, different frequencies, ghosts, stuck spirits. This is all in the realms that I work in. But that also means when you're in a very low state, that's when you can be prime for targeting. Not all spirits are pure love and light. There is darkened frequencies out there. And so I'm just going to gently show you how to decord and release yourself from any dark attachments. We can all do this. So I'm just going to guide you through it and just use your spiritual super senses, your supernatural essences, just to tap in and feel whether you've been corded into anything and what you might need to release. So I hope that this is a really helpful practice when you're in the depths of despair, or even when you're not, you're just feeling a slight depression, you're struggling how to get out of that, or feeling grief in any manner, because it's not an easy emotion to cope with. So getting yourself comfortable, either sitting or laying down and closing your eyes, and breathing into your lower stomach, your sacral center. And maybe placing your hands on this spot and releasing, and breathing in and releasing. And one more time, blowing the stomach up wide, bigger, puffing like a balloon, and releasing all that stagnant energy. And I want you to focus in on this orange center, low stomach, and just feel into whether there's any compression or tightness. And you can continue to send breath there if you need it. Just feel into whether there's any trapped emotions. Give your body the time to breathe and feel and heal. This is a space where we can often stuff emotions down to deal with later. But there is no later, the time is now to feel and heal. So if you need to spend this time to release and cry and purge, then allow yourself this time to be with your gentle body, to feel into this space, to go into a deep rest and a chance to witness what's coming up for you. Because at the other side of this pain and heaviness is often where creativity and flow, the opposite of stagnation, arises. I want you to really feel into this part of your body and see if there's any desires or urges or addictions that you've been holding on to. Just let your mind's eye just float into your lower stomach and see if there's anything that you've been doing to try and mask this emotion, to try and fill this void, this space. Try and stuff down how you've really been feeling. And keep breathing, keep taking big deep breaths down to the lower stomach. And allow yourself to feel that pain, that emptiness, the void. What I want you to do now is take a body scan of inside your body and around your auric field which surrounds your body. And just check in whether you have any cords or attachments. And these can feel like little tugs of energy, or maybe you see it, any sort of shadow areas inside or around your body. Just see where your mind's eye is taking you. Is there a pain point? Is there a shadowy area, or is there just a knowing that some of your energy has been harvested, or there's a cord coming out of your body, a darker cord that needs releasing? And in your mind's eye you can feel yourself pulling these away. Or if you work with an angelic guide, ask them to come in and clear these cords. Archangel Michael is always happy to do this work with you. And another way to see if you've been corded to anything is to let your memory float into the last traumatic event or something that upset you, or when your energy last felt like it was slightly attacked or lowered, and see if that has an attachment to somebody else. Does someone else come up into your mind's eye or appear in front of you or behind you or around you? And if they do, release this energy from you to them to you. Just feel that cord. It will often be a dark cord. Come away from your body and be dissolved. And do a body scan again. See if any of your attachments have been cleared. And when taking out these cords, you can transmute them in a violet fire. Just let a violet flame appear around you, in front of you, and let these cords dissipate into that flame. And this is a daily hygiene practice that's great to keep up if you're going through grief or you're feeling emotionally low, tired, run down. And then finally I want you to tap into any entities that may be around you. And this won't be people that have triggered you or events. This will be a frequency, a shadow force. And this can feel more like a sucking or a pulling energy or a weight. And just feel around your body if there's anything sort of being drained out of you. Any portals, anything opened up in your body, around your mind, any tags. Or if you can see auras, see if there's any rips in your aura. Scan your body. See if there's any portals or tears. Just trust yourself that you can do this. And then disconnect from this energy. And disconnecting by saying you don't consent to anyone taking your energy. You have free will. You own your body's energy. You are a sovereign being of divine spirit. And you release any demonic attachments to the light to be transmuted onto a journey of their own free will. And just feeling any of these attachments release, transmute, and go into the light. And then making sure that you seal your aura, your body field, your energy centers. And you can do this by putting a golden bubble of light all around you. And if you're feeling like extra protection, you can put black netting over that so you can keep yourself more internal. And sealing and protecting all of your chakras. And placing your hands on your sacral chakra again. Or if you've kept your hands there, just feel into a vibration, a radiation, as we spend a moment healing this sacral center. And when you're ready, ensuring that your field is protected and vibrant, you can gently come into your body, wriggling your hands and your feet, stretching and opening your eyes. So I wanted to end with a final little channeling on karma, dharma, and your soul's plan when it comes to grief and spiritual understanding of death. So some of us have come in spiritually to grow and awaken and learn, and we might have been through a phase of understanding, oh, there's more to life, there's spirits, there's angels, there's this, there's that. We might be through a phase where we've realised, oh, there's also darker entities and shadow forces at play in spirituality, and we've gone through that phase. And then there might be a sort of a final transition, a third element, when we realise that we've come in to do something much bigger than we expected, and that's part of our soul's plan. For me, I realised that I'd come in and contracted to very much walk my dad through the death process, which isn't something I expected and wasn't something I realised until about a week before he died. And in this week, I was very much sensing. I was teaching a Black Rose course at the time, and we were going through Angels and Demons Week, and I was going through a lot of my old notes of angelic Reiki, where I was trained, and bringing some of those teachings forward, as well as demonics and more shadow forces. And these are the realms that I've worked with a lot, but it was something, teachings I was moving into more and more and more over the past few years. And what I was realizing is that I was actually walking my dad through his last 7 days. I got the premonition. It was like, oh, this might be the last week he's here. And so I was working through the Reiki book that I was working with. I was trained in Angelic Reiki by Christine Kaur, and her husband, Kevin Kaur, had actually set up the foundation with her, and he died of cancer. And she went through very much the last 7 days of how you work with someone as a healer, knowing that you can only open space for healing rather than changing what's happening, but setting angelic space, working with oils, touch, hands, comfort, knowing that different senses are becoming ignited. Sound, it gets really tapped in, a tendency to be overstimulated, to get a second sort of energy wave. Lots of these different processes happen in the last 7 days. So as I had this intuition, not that I knew that, I wasn't told it was going to be his last 7 days, but something in me was like, yes, it is. And I was working through all these practices. As divine timing would happen, my dad had COVID near the end, so he was moved to a separate ward. So I had the space very much to work. I brought in my angelic Reiki music, I brought in crystals, I brought in light frequencies, I brought in my healing work, and did a lot of sacred touch with sacred oils, and cleansed and cleared the space as much as I could to align his transition. And this was something I was very much called to do. And then 2 days before he died, I went into grief because I knew it was coming. And then one day before, a doctor actually told me he was terminally ill, and he died the next day. So there was a lot of deep intuition and soul knowings that were happening. And as he died, I realised that I'd contracted to walk him through these final days on a soul level. So what I want to bring in as part of the death process is there's a lot of beautiful soul midwives out there, death doulas, psychopomps that are shamanically trained. And these people all have an awareness of what the death process is and how to help souls over to the light. And this is an ancient, beautiful ancient practice that many spiritual people have been taught or know about. And I felt very, very gifted that I had kind of awakened and remembered all of these sacred practices in me so that I could gift my dad in that way. Now, I'm not saying it's easy at all. It's really not easy to lose a loved one. It's not easy to witness it. But on a soul level, once I understood that I'd contracted to do this, I kind of submitted and gave myself fully to the process. Even though it hurt me, I knew the great gift of healing I could give, and it made it all worthwhile. So I feel like it is always worth tapping into what you're doing on a bigger soul level, and how you are beautifully managing to heal and help people, because as I was talking of earlier, that we need these more sacred, aligned, spiritual funerals. I feel that we need these beautiful, heart-centered, sacred practices brought back into the death process. So, yeah, I hope today has helped give you some ideas and comfort if it's something that you're going through. I hope you are able to bring your own spiritual, creative practices to this process. And I hope through whatever that is, whether that's spending time sitting in sacred space with your loved one, or channeling and writing something, or through giving these beautiful sacred practices and healing, if it's something that you're going through now, I hope one of those practices bring you great healing and higher light and a real sense of soul and nourishment.